As I was preparing for this talk this afternoon, I thought about what I'd like to hear or what I needed to hear if I was in your seat, entering a different and a new stage in my life. And it caused me to go down memory lane. When I was 17, a senior in my physics class, on the very first day of the first semester of that class, my teacher, we'll just call him Mr. A, he laid down the ground rules for us. And one of those rules was we were not to tamper with the cupboards and we were not to sit on the countertops that were on the opposite sides of the room. I was totally okay with that. Didn't have a need to hop on a countertop, so the rule was fine. But one day, after the lecture, when we were doing our homework, trying to finish it so that we wouldn't have to do it that evening, I'm sure you guys know how that is, I looked to my left, and I saw that a young lady was sitting on the countertop. I thought, I think that's against the rules. And then I looked at my teacher. He obviously saw her and didn't say anything. And I thought again, should I address this issue with him? But I decided not to. Instead, I decided to join her. So I went to the opposite side of the room, just like my mic is doing. Aggravating, just like I did the teacher. I went to the opposite side of the room and I sat on the countertop. My teacher immediately saw me and told me to get down. And I said, "Of course, sir, I'll get down as soon as you tell her to sit down." He didn't like that very much. And because he was the teacher and I was the student, I walked out of class that day with 4 Saturday schools. It was a really tough lesson for me to learn. But I learned that, one, life's not fair. Sometimes those things happen. And I also learned that I would have to stand up for what I believed in, no matter what the consequences were. My actions were punished. They were, in effect, criminalized when the other young lady, who happened to be white, didn't have any consequences for her actions. But that incident took me on a journey in my life, from my high school physics class to college to law school, through politics, and now at the ACLU, where I'm happy to be working and standing up for the rights for the most vulnerable today. And that incident also reminds me of a charge that Martin Luther King Jr. had for us. And that is that we have the moral obligation to stand up against laws that are unjust. We see that throughout our history. We see the motivation that leaders and members of movements have to stand up. We saw it in the abolitionist movement. Those who believe that slavery should end immediately were seen during their time as unreasonable and as radical. That was not the mainstream thinking of the time, but they decided to stand up in their own conviction. We see that in the women's suffrage movement, where women were the first to occupy and picket the White House in our nation's history. They were arrested for that. They were ostracized, but they would not stand down because they wanted the right to vote. Thank God. And then we see the freedom riders. The freedom riders who got on a bus, an integrated bus, black and white people together, drove to the South to defy segregation laws in the South. One of those buses was bombed in Alabama. And the locals of that town picked up metal pipes to beat the passengers of that bus. But they persisted. They moved forward in their conviction. Then we have Tommy Smith and John Carlos, 2 Olympic athletes who participated in the 1968 Olympic Games. They used an international stage to show solidarity to Black folks at home in America, and also to protest the human rights violations that were going on in our very own country at the time. They received death threats, and they came home to what really was for them a barren land where they could not get unemployment, and they were rejected time and time again. And then there's Colin Kaepernick, who we have recently experienced his protest. In 2016, almost 50 years later, Colin Kaepernick now has been rejected. He's been voted the most hated NFL player of the year 2016. And he has also received death threats because he decided to stand up for what he believes is right and just. And during our time, one of the most popular movements of our time here today is the Black Lives Matter movement, a movement that was really started off as a hashtag. And it was created after the death of Trayvon Martin. And really what it does is it challenges a system that oppresses Black people and people of color. We do not know how history is going to judge our most recent movements, but we do know how they look at the ones that come before us. If we look at the civil rights movement again, during the time, during the protests, during the resistance of that movement, people were beaten, they were bitten by dogs, they were hosed down, but they persisted in doing what they felt was right, and they felt that they did not have a choice. Today, we celebrate the civil rights movement. We celebrate the leaders as heroes. At a time when they were called derogatory names, now they are our heroes in history books. We don't drink out of separate water fountains. We don't eat in separate dining areas because of the sacrifices they made. But the point is, in the moment of their protest, in the moment of their movement, they were not popular, and it was not easy. It was not an easy choice to make, to leave the house in protest, not knowing if you would come back. But they made that choice, and they made that choice for us. So I want to tell you, as I conclude, sort of a tale of two cities. One city is a modern city. It has a population of about 21,000 people. The people of that city did not feel represented by their government. And it was found in that city that a corrupt system was being used, and their criminal justice system was shaped to put profit over people, to put money over public safety. In fact, in that city, it was not uncommon that an illegal parking ticket would cost someone $1,000 and 6 nights in jail. The residents of that city felt a lack of opportunity, a lack of economic justice, a lack of growth. One night, a young man was shot and killed in the city by police. After which, riots ensued. Property was damaged, among other things, but the debate was sparked again about the use of force of police officers and the value of a Black person's life in America. The young man was 18 years old, and his name was Michael Brown, and that city was Ferguson. But I want to tell you about another city where an angry mob took to the streets because there was a lack of opportunity in that town. There was a lack of jobs in that town, a lack of growth. And as that angry mob caused more ruckus, law enforcement shot into the crowd. They shot a 17-year-old teenager named Mr. Samuel Maverick. And they shot 5 other people. That night we now call the Boston Massacre. I tell these 2 stories because there are similarities. Doesn't matter if it's 1770, 2014, black or white. Both towns were oppressed. And when the people are oppressed, they rise up. When the people are oppressed, they resist. And they protest for a better life. You are living in a time now where some of your rights that people have fought for are being threatened. But do not be silenced. Continue to pursue the rights that every American and every person should have. Do not be discouraged by your age. Soon you'll be able to vote. But more than that, I encourage you to get civically engaged. Go to your local city council meeting. Find an issue that you are passionate about and advocate for that issue. This will affect your life and the lives of others around you. Be strong in your conviction. And get past the moment where what you're doing may have consequences and it may not be popular. But if you are patient, you will make history. You are the voice that we are waiting on. Thank you.